Yellow and Red Mix by DG27 in Chapter 52. Gara looked, Naruto looked over at the smirking form of the Kasakage when he had said he would send the people to pick up Kurim, Yukimaru, and Gozu. He hadn't expected him to come himself. Hello, Naruto. I expect you weren't expecting me to come. Naruto just nodded dumbly while he had popped up behind Gara. Hi Tajiya, hi Naruto. Both of them waved at Matsuri, a little dumbstruck that both had left Suna to come all the way here. Gara saw this and smiled, waving his hands to dispel any ideas they might have been getting. No, I didn't come all the way here just to escort your friends. That would be a little overkill, don't you think? Naruto just nodded, his usual smile coming back to his face as Gara turned to face the Raikage. I came to speak to Raikage Dono. I figured it was about time we met. Naruto was a little surprised that the two hadn't met already, but he guessed they were both busy and couldn't afford to up and leave the villages. This made him wonder what had changed. Gara saw this as well. I decided that the Katsuki has gotten away with too much. It's time we did something about it before something bad happens. I have already received word that nobody has seen Iwis Jinchuriki for a few months now, either of them. Now to put his head down solemnly, he knew that Minakatsuki had gotten to them. That is why we have decided to convene in Konoha. Kiri will also be there if Mizukaki Dono accepts the message I sent him. Now to look at him confused. Like Konoha, he figured somewhere more neutral would be appreciated, even if all four countries were somewhat allies. Kiri had gained a reputation thanks to their past. Despite everything, Mei was working to change. Kumo wasn't exactly liked in Konoha after certain incidents in the past, which the Raikage was also working to fix. Sooner were Konoha allies, but that wouldn't stop any petty personal grudges people had with Wind Country. In all in all, Naruto didn't believe it to be a very good idea. I know what you are thinking, but a neutral country wouldn't be good right now, and there would be nothing stopping Akatsuki or anybody else from attacking while we are all convened. That is why we must do it in the shinobi country, where we will at least be protected to a degree. He looked at Tajiya and Naruto, smiling softly at his oldest and closest friend, and that is why you will accompany me as my bodyguard for the duration of the summit. Naruto still didn't seem sure of it. But what about Iwa? They won't be happy at all. The other Kage are convening. The Raikage scoffed from his chair, obviously finding the idea laughable. Ha! Like Onoki would ever try something that legendary fence sitter wouldn't dare. Gara nodded solemnly. Raikage Dono is correct. Even Tsuchikage Dono would not risk attempting anything with all the other nations convened at once. He sighed as he looked at the Raikage. Even so, I have sent him an invitation to the summit, despite how unlikely it is for him to actually come. That way he cannot blame us for convening without Iwa having a representative. Naruto nodded with a frown. Gara made a good case, even if he still didn't like it. But why does it concern Iwa at all? Like you said, they don't even have Jinchuriki anymore. Gara shook his head. Despite how much Naruto had grown, he could be a bit short-sighted at times. No, the immediate situation does not concern Iwagakure, but the Katsuki are collecting the Bichu for a reason. While we don't know what that reason is, it is obviously not good. That does concern Iwagakure. As a major village, they have a right to know what we are doing to stop them. Naruto just nodded. While he had slightly less restriction thanks to their friendship, Gara was still his Kasukage, and he would have to listen to him. Fine. So when are we leaving? Gara looked at the Raikage, who simply nodded. Tomorrow. It's best to deal with this soon before there are any more issues. Naruto nodded. At least that made sense to him. Tajiya, on the other hand, was frowning, counting off on her hands. Raikage-sama, who would you be bringing as escorts? Look at her curiously, wondering what the redhead was thinking. Yujito and B. I wouldn't have anybody else as my personal escorts. Plus, they are the most powerful shinobi in the village in active service. Tajiya nodded with a frown. But then with Gara, Naruto, Fu, B, and Jujito, all three plus whoever Mei brings, wouldn't that be a lot of Jinchuriki in one place? Naruto's eyes widened, seeing what he was driving at as he turned to Gara. Yes, that is correct. Precisely the reason why we are doing this. No matter how powerful Akatsuki believe themselves to be, they would not dare attack a hidden village when it contains 5 Jinchuriki and 4 Kage. It would simply be foolish. Naruto had to agree with Gara on that one. The numbers alone were intimidating, to say the least. Nobody would pit themselves against those odds. Naruto suddenly had a thought as he turned back to Gara. Wait, if we're going to Konoha, then who is escorting Gurren Yukimato and Gosu to Suna? Gar just smiled as the door to the Kage's office opened to reveal two figures. Hey, Squirt, long time no see. Not returned to see the smirking faces of Kankuro and Tamari. Naruto was walking through the streets of Kumo, flanked on one side by Tayuya and Fu, on the other by Kankuro and Tamari. He was busy showing the pair around Kumo while the Kage showed Gaara and Matsuri around himself. Right now, Naruto seriously wished he was with them as Kankuro chatted about how he had converted Sasori's old body into a puppet called Scorpion. It all sounded far too morbid for Naruto's taste, but he politely nodded along while Tamari was shooting him apologetic looks. They stopped for some lunch at one of Tayuya's preferred restaurants, mainly because they were one of the few that served in ongoing Kumo. Tamara constantly looked between Tayuya and Naruto with a smirk, mostly because Tayuya was sitting as close to the blonde as physically possible without sitting on his lap. She would have done, but the table was too low down, and it would have been uncomfortable for both of them. Fu was also slightly cuddling up to Naruto on one side, but not quite to the extent that Tayuya was. Kota to Tayuya. Tamari nearly scowled at Kankuro for breaking the awkward silence that she had been enjoying so much. Tayuya just rubbed her neck idly, while Naruto looked at her with concern. He knew that ever since he had altered the seal, Tayuya wasn't in any discomfort, but any mention of it would make her remember how it used to be. He just smiled and wrapped a comfortable arm around the redhead's shoulder, pulling her closer into him. It's a seal, actually. Kankuro nodded with a smile, still shoveling the food into his mouth without abandoning. What to do? He yelped as Tamari kicked him from under the table. Her brother might have been an observant moron, but she could clearly see the topic was a painful one for Tayuya. Naruto just smiled at them both warmly. It's okay, Tamari. I guess we never told you about it before. He tried to remember back to when Orochimaru had first given her the seal in the second stage of the Chunin exams. After that, he guessed it must have just never come up with Tamari or Kankuro. He quickly examined it he quickly explained it to them about what Orochimaru had done and how Kakashi had sealed it before a few days ago when Naruto improved it, getting rid of its negative properties. The two Suna siblings listened intently, wondering how they hadn't heard about this sooner, especially after 2 years. Well, I didn't know you could use seals. Everyone just looked at Kankuro incredulously while Tamari slapped him over the back of the head. That's what you took away from this? Kankuro just shrugged and went back to his food while everybody else just sat. Fu giggled a little. She found the interaction between the siblings funny, knowing it was all in good fun. Naruto recovered, finishing the last of his dongle, while Tayuya pouted. He usually left the rest of it for her, but was hungry today after the spar. Well, I guess we should introduce you guys to the people you'll be escorting back to Suna. Tamara just nodded, having finished her own meal while Kankuro tried to cram as much of his as he could into one of his pouches. Naruto led them back out, taking them over to where Gurren and the others were staying, still under observation from Kumo. For some reason, he had a feeling that Gurren would get along with Tamara. Tayuya walked next to Naruto, enjoying the feel of his arm wrapped around her waist. It almost made her feel so secure. So, you want to do something tonight? It is our last night in Kumo. Naruto nodded idly with a smile. Yeah, that sounds like fun, but I think I should visit Kurama first. With everything else that's been going on recently, we haven't had much time to talk. Tayuya just nodded with a sigh. She wasn't necessarily jealous of Kyubi. She just didn't like that Naruto would almost place them with the same importance. Okay, she wasn't fooling anybody. She was jealous as hell. Of course, she wouldn't say anything as it would make her sound petty. Naruto couldn't help that the Chinese demon was sealed in his stomach. Then again, it didn't really help that the Kyubi was a woman, although Naruto always assured her that Yu was far more attractive in his eyes. Naruto had seen some strange things in his life. Fu's wings, a Hedon's talking head, a woman materializing out of paper, and a giant rapping octopus, just to name a few. However, the scene that someone would walk into in his mindscape later on that night would have ranked very high on that list. If someone else was able to enter it, they would have seen an enormous fox with 9 tails. Normally, that alone would have been enough for some people to call strange larger or unusual. Of course, Naruto never did anything in half measures, so of course the enormous nine-tailed fox was on her bed, writhing in pleasure as over 100 clones of one plunging jerky were rubbing her stomach. The furry but powerful tails thrashed about as the QB received the tummy rub of a lifetime. The clones used whatever they could to scratch her. The landscape around them was slowly being leveled as the tails destroyed everything in sight. Kurama unable to control them as her mind was lost to the pleasure of the moment. A few minutes later, Naruto had dispelled all his clones while the QB had shrank back to her smaller size. She was still on her back, though panting heavily as she tried to recover from the clone massage. Naruto was still smiling at her. He knew all the tail beasts' lives must have been hard. They were created by the sage of the six paths and nearly on his deathbed, and dying not too long after. They had to grow up in a grow up in a world that didn't understand them, remembering only the Jubi and destruction it had wrought them. Naturally, they were feared, hated, driven out by the fearful humans who couldn't accept the enormous chakra constructs. In a way that felt connected to them, like he could understand them. They had both grown up without parents, only having a name to go on. They both were feared for something beyond their control. They both had to grow up without guidance, without truly knowing what was right or wrong and why. In the end, Naruto could connect with QB more and more, except Gaara. You remind me of him, you know. Naruto looked around to where Kurama was watching him, still on her back with her paws raised up in such an adorable way. He had difficulty believing the power she held. Who? Kurama smiled warmly, a rare occurrence with the great fox. Our father, you are a lot like you. We may not have known him for very long, but we have vague memories of when we were still a part of Mother. He could find the good in anybody, help them to bring it out. But at the same time, he knew when violence was necessary. Even though he loathed it, he was powerful, but humble beyond belief. He never asked for anything in return for what he did. In fact, he looked a lot like you looked a lot like you too. You look a lot like it too. If you had red hair, and no whiskers, I would almost call you twins. Naruto wasn't sure what to make of being compared to the most legendary figure in the shinobi world. Really? QB just nodded with melancholy. It had been a better time back then for a short while. She had her siblings and her father. Then he passed away, leaving a world that, despite them, feared them and drove them apart. Again, it had seemed good for a while. The memories faded with the generations, and left alone for a while. Then stories became legends, and people sought out the Biju for the power, stealing them away into hosts to fight their wars. The hatred of humanity was too much for some of them, driving Shukaku insane as he was forced to watch a monk become a weapon of war. I'm not the only one. Chomei sees it as well, and I'm sure if Shukaku would leave his bloodlust for even a moment, he would see it too. He practically worshipped Father. Naruto sighed, thinking about everything that had been done to the Bichu, everything they had to live through. Even QB wasn't spared. He thought of how she was sealed within him, stripped of over half of her chakra. The Biju weren't like humans. Chakra was what they were, and to have it taken away must be like losing a limb. Kurama, QB looked up, rolling onto her side to better speak to Naruto. I've been thinking about what you told me. The fox quirked her head quizzically. About your yin chakra. QB sat up on her haunches before padding over to sit beside Naruto, letting the blonde rest against her body as the few tails were wrapped around him. This was their standard position when they talked, a remnant from when Naruto was a child and would do this. Why doesn't it just replenish itself like normal chakra? He had been pondering this question for a while. Chakra wasn't limitless, so one could use it up. However, after resting, it would replenish itself. Kurama chuckled sadly, watching one of her own tails sway in front of her. Does Biju chakra not recover? Kurama seemed to be hypnotized by her own tail, a symbol of her power among the Biju, none of them marking her as the most powerful, even with only half of her chakra available. Yes, it does, but without foundation, a house cannot be built. Naruto looked up at her curiously as Kurama continued to watch her tail. Energy cannot come into being from nothing. It must come from somewhere. That is why a human will die if they use all their chakra. If there is none there to grow from, it will not grow. Naruto nodded slowly. So there needed to be some chakra there in the first place for it to replenish itself. and without any yin chakra, and QB couldn't grow it back. Do you ever wonder why when you die, I will as well? Whereas where when Gara B, Yujito, or even Fu someday pass, their Biju will only be freed. Naruto nodded. He had wondered that sometimes, but also just put it up to the seal, and the fourth had used them. In a sense, it is true. I will die, but not in the way you think. Naruto looked up again, partly wondering why Kyuubi was telling him this. When the day comes and you pass in the next life, I will be freed from this prison into the world. However, without my yin chakra, I can never take form again. In a sense, I will be dead. Naruto blinked a few times, his eyes furrowing as he thought fiercely about what Kyuubi had told him. The cogs in his head spun rapidly as his mind flickered from idea to idea. Now Kurama could be nothing but yang chakra floating through the world forever, unable to affect it in any meaningful way again. It sounded like a terrible fate to Naruto, not one he wished on the fox that had become his first friend. Is there nothing we can do? And Kurama just chuckled. Oh yes, she saw so much of her father in the boy, so willing to help and hating feeling helpless. I have accepted my fate, Naruto. To recover my yin chakra from the Shinigami would be impossible. Nothing returns from his stomach. Naruto frowned again. His mind was working harder than it ever had before. Slowly, a smile found its way onto his face. Even as crazy, stupid, and brilliant plan began to form. Kurama, the Kyuubi finally broke her gaze away from her tails to stare down at Naruto, red eyes meeting blue. The seal draws out your chakra, right, and converting it from a form harmful to me into my own, so that I can use it. Kyuubi nodded, her eyes narrowing as she began to suspect what Naruto was proposing. What if I just reversed it and converting my yin chakra into a form that you could use, letting you redevelop it on your own? And Kurama blinked at the suggestion, unable to truly believe what the young man was telling her. But that would mean putting yourself in a situation where I could drain out your chakra. You would be at my mercy with a physical form. I could have a body again. I would no longer fear our deaths being intertwined. In fact, your death would be to my benefit. I could be free again. Naruto listened to her, his warm smile never wavering for a moment. When she stopped, he simply looked up at her, making sure their eyes were looking directly at one another. I trust you. For a moment, Kyuubi could almost see her father's face superimposed across Naruto's before she realized what it was. Their smiles were the same, so full of compassion and caring that one couldn't help but be drawn in by it. And Kyuubi sighed as she was brought back to memories of her father with that exact same smile. Even if you wanted to, Kit, you don't have the key to your seal. Without it, you couldn't alter it. Naruto frowned. She was right. He didn't have the key to his seal, and there was no way he had the time to pick it apart bit by bit. It would take years. He thought about who might have it. Konoha would only entrust it to somebody powerful who could protect it. Someone with sealing skills. The first person that came to mind was the fourth himself, but he was dead. So the next logical choice was Jiraiya the Sannin. He was powerful. That much was obvious from what he knew. He traveled a lot, which would keep the key safe, and he was a sealing master, which made him perfect. The only problem was tracking him down. Hopefully, when they were in Konoha, he could ask Tsunade about it. Until then, there was little he could do about it. Naruto woke up from his mindscape to the soft tune of a flute. It's a melodious song filled the air as he sat up from the bed. Taiya sat at the window, her eyes closed as her features were set into a smile. She was almost never happier than when she could play her flute. Naruto also enjoyed it. Her harmonies were relaxing and beautiful to listen to, drawing you in. He smiled as he saw Taiyo finish her song, pulling her metal instrument from her lips almost reluctantly. I could get used to waking up to that. Taiya looked around at Naruto with a smirk, walking over as she pushed him back down onto the bed, playfully. And what would you be willing to do for it? He just chuckled and grabbed her arm, pulling her down on top of him before wrapping her up in his arms. They scooted up the bed until they were in the semi-sitting position that gave them a view of the star-studded sky out of the window. Taiya wrapped her arms around Naruto's waist before nuzzling her face into his chest. So what did you talk about? Naruto smiled. smiled. She was always curious about what he and the QB talked about. We were discussing how to get rid of you quietly, so that we could run off and live happily ever after together. He heard a snort in his head as Taya looked up at him with mock hurt written over her features. Yeah, like you would ever dump this. She motioned with her hand across her own body, lingering over her endowments. Nato looked thoughtful for a moment before smirking. Yeah, you're right. Taya just huffed into a victorious manner, snuggling back into his chest. Damn right, I'm right. Naruto smiled as he kissed the top of her head, making Taya smile in content as they both looked out of the window again. But seriously, we were talking about a way to get Kyubi her yin chakra back. Taya looked around, shifting her position so she could look across at Naruto. Is that a good idea? Naruto just nodded with a shrug. I don't see why not. Could you imagine living without half of yourself for almost 17 years? Taya looked ready to argue, but seeing the conviction in Naruto's eyes, she knew she wasn't going to change his mind. Fine, I guess that would make you more powerful anyways. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He hadn't even considered that, but he guessed Taya was right. Having Kyubi almost double her chakra would also give him a boost. Naruto just smirked as he tugged her closer. That means you'll have some catching up to do. Taya returned the smirk as she playfully wrapped him on the forehead. Hey, once I got this mark down, you'd better watch your back. Naruto nodded as he settled back down on the bed. Yeah, once you get used to the chakra being pumped into your body, I could increase the flow. Hell, by the time we're done, you could have chakra incapable with the beat you. Taya smiled widely at the thought. Do you have that much power on her own? It would be incredible. Naruto just chuckled. Then you can see just how hard it is to cast a genjutsu with that much chakra. Her smile turned into a frown. She weighed the cost of having that much chakra to being unable to weave her intricate and subtle genjutsu, some of which had saved her life. Nah, I'll just work on my chakra control. Naruto snorted loudly. He knew it wasn't that easy. Even so, if anybody could do it, he could do it. He believed you could. Hell, if she managed it, she could put an entire army under genjutsu without a single one realizing it was happening. He shuddered unconsciously. Maybe it would be best if he didn't get on Taya's bad side when that day come. He smirked to himself. Better start laying the groundwork then. He rolled over and planted a quick kiss on Taya's lips, which she quickly deepened until it was a suitable French. The two rolled around on the bed as they got better acquainted with one another by slowly removing each other's clothes. Soon Naruto was in nothing but his boxers, while Taya was down to just her panties, now a vibrant red which matched her flaming hair. Unknowingly, Taya had activated her sail. Her body grew in certain areas while her hair shifted into pink. Naruto came up panting for breath and noticed the changes, specifically the ones that affected one of his favorite areas in Taya's body. Did you know when you activated your seal, your breasts get bigger? Taya looked down at herself, trying to figure out if he was right, while her brow furrowed. You think? Naruto smirked as he placed a hand against her breast, feeling it as he needed it to her heart's content. Pretty sure Taya would have slapped him for being so cheeky if her head hadn't already lulled back from the pleasurable action. She gasped as he felt she gasped as she felt his warm mouth envelop her nipple, sucking on it and licking it as his other hand tickled her stomach, gently caressing her body while she laid back and enjoyed the wonderful sensations. His warm and dexterous tongue swirled circles around her heart and blood before lightly flicking it, earning him moans as Taya arched her back. Naruto just smiled as he moved back, blowing on the cold air nearly too much for Taya as she yelped out in surprise. Naruto left his hands where they were as his mouth began to travel lower, licking and kissing her taut, a smooth stomach. Taya's hands gripped the bed sheets as she tried to keep her body from moving about too much and not really succeeding. Naruto finally reached his prize as he gently pulled down Taya's panties with nothing but his teeth. By the time he moved back up her legs to her slit, she was already glistening from anticipation and pleasure. He wasted no time in teasing her, licking around her dripping core before moving tantalizingly close, only to move back away again. He knew her limit, and before long, he planted a light kiss across her slit before licking it once across the length. Tagia moaned out in pleasure, but what really drove her over the edge was when he leant back and gently blew across her core. The sensation of the cold air across her privates, proving too much as she screamed out with her first climax of the night. Naruto smirked from his efforts of finding it strange that he could affect her so much without even properly using his tongue. Before Taiya could come down from her high thoughts, he started to swirl his tongue delicately around her swollen lips, licking up anything that came out. He flicked his tongue against her nub experimentally, only to smile when he heard her gasp. He did it again and again and again until Taiya was left panting heavily on her bed, riding out the pleasure sensations while forcing her hips forward, begging Naruto to go further. Not wanting to disappoint her, he gave one last lap to her special nub before hungrily digging into her soft tunnel with his tongue. He swirled it around and lapped at it while one hand played with her breast and the other held her steady at the hip. Taiya bit her lip but was unable to hold back the scream that came as she did, startling a bird that had landed on her windowsill. Naruto made sure he worked every last ounce of her orgasm, letting Taiya ride it as long as he was able. Finally, though, she came down, her body dropping to the bed as Naruto finished up drinking her nectar. He looked up at her, smiling through the valley of her cleavage before he crawled up the bed to lie at her side. He pulled an arm around her as he pulled her closer, content to have her warm naked body next to him. Tanya, however, frowned as she felt the tent in his boxer press up against her behind, thinking about all the times like these when he had done everything he could to pleasure her, while also for nothing in return. She could only imagine how frustrated he must feel, and while she wasn't quite ready to cross the line yet, there was something she could do. Turning around on the bed, she stared into his eyes, though through her own half-lit ones, taking in his smile and content features. She wondered how he could be like that when he was the one getting all the pleasure while he did all the work. Does he love me that much that just seeing me happy is enough for him? Taiya wrapped her arms around him tighter as a small tear made its way out of the corner of her eye. Naruto seemed surprised by the hug but didn't complain as he enjoyed the feeling of Taiya's moans pressed up against his chest. And thank you for everything, Naruto. Naruto just looked down at her confusingly. What are you talking about, Taiya-chan? And she brushed away another tear that threatened to escape her eyes before looking up at him. I don't know how my life would have been without you, and I don't want to know. Thank you for everything that you've done for me. I don't think I can ever repay you. Naruto just smiled at her kindly, only a small hint of confusion in his eyes now. Taiya, just you being here with me is enough, thanks. My life would be empty without you. She smiled before reaching across the small gap between them to lovingly kiss him. Just a simple kiss on the lips. She separated but proceeded to kiss him on the neck before moving to his collarbone, then his chest. Naruto just looked down, wondering what she was doing as she moved lower and lower on his body with her lips. Taiya-chan, what are you doing? She just held up a hand to quiet him while she smiled through her next kiss, like he had done minutes ago. She took his boxers with her teeth and tugged, pulling them off his body while he looked down. Naruto still wasn't sure what was happening, but let her do this curiously. She came back up, blinking as she stared at what she had uncovered, not quite sure what to make of it herself. She had heard from Tamara that size was important in a man. From only a glance, she would put it somewhere between 7 or 8 inches. She had no idea if that was good or not, but to her it just seemed right. Like Naruto, she started off with a simple lick, getting a taste for it. It was slightly salty, but she guessed that was from the sweat. Other than that, she couldn't really complain. However, it did bring a smile on her face when she thought it tasted of Naruto. Naruto, on the other hand, was blinking rapidly, both from the unexpected pleasure the lick brought him and the unexpected lick itself. He was able to ask what Taiya was doing when she did it again. A longer lick all the way from the base of his shaft to the tip. ending with a satisfied smack of her lips. If he had looked down, he would have seen Tayuya's eyes twinkle curiously, or perhaps mischievously. In her mind, this had just become a competition, as well as a form of recompense for all the times he had so easily manipulated her with his tongue, and grasping it lightly with her hands. She got a feel for it, and noting how warm it was before guiding it towards her mouth. She started by kissing the head. One was obviously off to a good start. If the hiss to Naruto's teeth was anything to go on, encouraged by this, she swirled her tongue around the head experimentally and grinding when she heard Naruto groan above her. Throwing caution to the wind, she took as much of it as she could into her mouth, nearly gagging as she went too far. Naruto nearly lost it then and there. The sensation of Tayuya's soft, warm mouth and her tongue gently moving against his member was incredible. Then she started to lightly bob up and down, sucking on it while swirling her tongue so it could taste even more of him. Naruto had his eyes clenched shut as he tried to hold back the groans that so desperately wanted to escape his mouth. Now he understood how Tayuya felt when he went down on her and was regretting missing out. Eventually, it proved too much, and he felt something building up, something that desperately wanted to be released. He looked down at Tayuya pleadingly while she looked up at him in turn with big emerald eyes. Tayuya-chan, he couldn't speak anymore before he felt it shoot out. Tayuya's eyes widened at the unexpected release. She almost widened and spat it out in shock, but remembered the way Naruto had so happily lapped up her own juices that she tentatively swallowed it. It wasn't bad, a bit salty, and the aftertaste was slightly bitter. There was nothing she could really compare it to. She moved away from him, so crawling back up the bed to him, so he could instantly wrap his arms around her and draw her closer. I love you, Tayuya-chan. She smiled as she let him pull her towel towards him, pulling the bed sheet over them. So as he did so, yeah, I love you too, shithead. End chapter 52.